I'm Rory Fitzgerald. I'm Professor of Practice and Survey Research at City University of London. Good evening and welcome to the NatCen City University and European Social Survey seminar series. Just in terms of our methods seminar series, so this is a joint collaboration between NatCen Social Research, European Social Survey and City University of London. We have some future online seminars coming up. So on the 10th of June, Michael Bosniak will be talking about evidence-based survey operations. And on the 25th of June, Peter Luchtig from Utrecht University will be talking about mobile app collection. And then moving on to October, we'll be hosting Joost Kappelhoff from SCP in the Netherlands and Roberto Rosas from GACIS, looking at desirable interview behaviour. So those are the forthcoming online webinars. Hopefully in November, we'll all be meeting again in person, and we're hoping then to host John Krosnick. For information on our past survey method events, there's 21 seminars that have been held since May 2017, and slides and or recordings of those are available online. Okay, so it's my pleasure this evening to welcome our speaker from the University of Southampton, Dr. Olga Maslovskaya, who's a lecturer and assistant professor at the Department of Social Statistics and Demography at the University of Southampton. And Olga is an expert in the area of online surveys and data quality. She's been the principal investigator on the ESRC Secondary Data Analysis Initiative, Understanding Survey Response Behaviour in a Digital Age, and has also been a co-investigator at the NCRM Collaborative Methodological Research Training Project, The Future of Online Surveys, Evaluating Data Quality in the UK Probability-Based Online Panels. She's also currently the PI on a new and exciting ESRC-funded project, transitioning from interviewer-administered survey to online data collection, experiences, challenges, and opportunities, known to its friends as Gen Pop Web 2 Network. So I'm delighted to welcome Olga to our seminar, the series, this evening. I'm sure it'll be a fascinating discussion. So I'm going to unmute Olga so that she can take part in the discussion. And I'm now going to share the screen with her. Now, due to Zoom security arrangements, unfortunately, the slides have to be operated from here, from the host. That Olga will need just to ask me to pass the slides on as we move through. So please allow for that. So Olga, over to you. I'll just bring up your slides.
Thank you very, very much, Rory. Thank you for introducing me. Good evening, everyone. And thank you very much for joining this webinar this evening. I really hope you and all your families are well and healthy. And yeah, so today I'm going to talk about data quality in mixed device online surveys in the UK. Next slide, please. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about results and outputs which were produced during our ESRC Secondary Data Analysis Initiative project, which was entitled Understanding Survey Response Behavior in the Digital Age, Mixed Device Online Survey and Mobile Device Use. This project just finished at the end of March, so it's perfect timing for us to do summaries and to discuss all outputs which were produced. So I was a principal investigator on this project, and co-investigators were Gabi Durrant and Peter Smith, who are both also from the University of Southampton. Next slide, please. So here is a disclaimer. Thank you. So before I start talking about specific results and specific outputs, I just wanted to introduce two main objectives of the entire project. So first, we wanted to better understand participants' online survey choices and behavior. And second, to understand data quality issues in online surveys with a special focus on smartphones. And all of this was supposed to be done in the UK context, because by that time, there was quite a bit of research done in other countries, but nothing was done in the UK. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to talk about the project outputs. So we produced 4 main outputs. So I'm going to talk about the second and the third output in detail and all the results. And then I'll briefly mention results from the 4th output. But the first output was published already in 2019 in International Statistical Review Journal. So I will not talk about this. If you would like to know more about this, please try to get the paper. If you cannot get hold of the paper and interested in these findings, please contact me and I will see what I can do. So the first output, we investigated characteristics of people using different devices in UK mixed device online surveys. And the team who was working on it was myself, Gabi, Darren, Peter Smith, Tim Hansen, who that time was in Qatar Public, and Anna Wheeler, who that time was working for European Social Service. The second and the third output, they were looking at the same research question and the same issues, but we were using 2 different data sources and 2 different contexts, which I'm going to talk about a bit later. So the second output, we looked at the data quality in non-optimized UK mixed device online survey and used Understanding Society Wave 8 data for the analysis. And the team was myself, Peter Smith, and Gabi Darrant. Next slide, please. The third output, again, we looked at data quality, but in mobile-first UK mixed device online surveys. And we analyzed tests and experiments which were conducted within labor market survey collected by the Office for National Statistics. And the team who was working on this was myself, Gabi Darrant, Peter Smith, and Andrew Phelps from the Office for National Statistics. And the last output, we looked at representativeness and CRONOS probability-based online cross-national online panel. And the team who was working on this was myself, Peter Luchtig from the University of Utrecht, and Gabi Darrant. Next slide, please. So before I start talking about the results, I wanted to talk a bit about motivation. Why did we decide to actually do this project? So I'll talk a little bit what was actually happening back in 2018 with the online surveys. So as we all know, response rates and social surveys were declining for years and survey costs were increasing. Also, we observed that the internet use was rising, and back then in 2018, 90% of adults in the UK used internet daily, and 87% of households in the UK had internet connection in 2018. What was more important, that by the year 2017, 76% of adults owned a smartphone in the UK. Could you please show the next slide for a second? If that's okay. Thank you. Let's have a look at this graph. So it was a graph from Tim Hansen's presentation, which he gave in 2018. So if you look here at the year 2017, 76% of adults in the UK owned smartphone in comparison to only 27% back in 2011. And we also can look here at interesting trajectory of tablet use, tablet ownership. So we can see 59% in 2017 in comparison to only 2% in 2011. Can we please look back to the previous slide? Thank you. So all these numbers, they continue to rise. So at that stage in 2018, given this high prevalence of ownership of smartphones and tablets, we couldn't expect all respondents to use only desktops and PCs in online components of surveys any longer. So also what was happening during that time, data collection organizations were undergoing paradigm shift and moving towards online data collection. So this work was quite important at that stage. Can we please move 2 slides forward? Yeah, thank you. So as you probably all know, I'll just give a brief historical overview of how smartphones were treated within surveys. So previously, smartphones were blocked for respondents for survey completion because they were believed that if respondents would be using them, the data quality produced by these respondents would be of very bad quality. Then they were discouraged. And when I present the results from the Understanding Society Wave 8, we will see that even at that stage, they were still discouraged at that stage. And the reason why the use of smartphones was discouraged, because the questionnaires were not optimized for smaller screens, for smaller size screens. But then questionnaires started being optimized. However, there are still concerns about lower data quality produced by respondents using smartphones in social surveys in the UK. So at that point in time, in 2018, as I already mentioned, there were no much done, researched in the United Kingdom. There was one paper published in 2018 in Social Research Practice Journal by colleagues from Qatar Public, and also Alex Vance, who worked in Essex University at that time. So they looked at data quality in mixed device online surveys, but they specifically look at second longitudinal study of young people in England. So this sample contained only those who were 16 to 17-year-olds. So we didn't know much about general population at all at that stage. Also, there was one presentation which was done by Tim Hansen, presented by Tim Hansen 2018, and they conducted some work on data quality assessment within community life survey. So, of course, we know that this topic was particularly relevant in the UK, because we know that UK Census 2021 plans to collect responses from 75% of UK households online, and also various online versions of key UK household surveys were already developed. Next slide, please. So that were our motivations, why we actually applied for the funding and why we started this work. As I mentioned, output one, I'll just very briefly mention what we did there. So we looked at characteristics of people choosing to complete surveys using smartphones. That time we looked at all available data in the UK context. So we looked at a couple of waves from Innovation Panel of Understanding Society, Community Life Survey, ESS experiment, 1958 and CTS, and also second longitudinal study of young people in England, wave 4. Next slide, please. So why this work was important? These results might be useful for targeting of certain groups more efficiently for survey participation. Also, they might help increase response rates if this is of interest, and also potentially reduce survey costs. Also, we all know that there is quite a lot of new forms of data being collected, and that could be useful when data are collected through sensors and apps using smartphones, as coverage issues of smartphones are explored in this paper. As I say, all the results are presented in the paper, so have a look if you're interested. And now, can we please move to the next slide? I'll start talking about the outputs 2 and 3. So the main aim was the same for both outputs. We wanted to compare data quality within online mode of mixed mode surveys collected through PC and laptops, tablets, and smartphones, with the main focus of on smartphones. Hopefully it's already clear why we were focusing on smartphones at that stage. So next slide, please. So, and our main research question for both pieces of work was, do we need to worry about the use of smartphones and social surveys for survey completion in the UK context? Next slide, please. So for the output 2, I used Understanding Society Wave 8 data for the analysis. While I was waiting for the Wave 8 data, I also did the analysis of Innovation Panel, Wave 9. However, groups who used smartphones for survey completion were very, very small. So we were waiting for this data to become available. So, and then this data became available on Understanding Society Wave 8, and we were able to analyze quite a large sample of nearly 8,000 individuals who opted, who were using online mode of survey completion. And what was good there, that 11.3% of all respondents used smartphones. So we were able to conduct in-depth and detailed investigation of the data quality for this specific group. What is very important here, I'm not going to go into many details about Understanding Society. You either may know about this, or if you're interested, you can have a look on their website. But what is very important to mention here, the advanced letter. It said that this year, the survey is available online at the website shown below. This means that you can now complete it at the time that's best for you. However, it might be easier for you to use a computer rather than a mobile device. So you can see that even back in 2017, respondents of Understanding Society by Fate were discouraged from using smartphones. However, we still have quite a sizable group who did use smartphones, but we need to remember that the questionnaires were not optimized for smaller screens. Yeah. So next slide, please. As I already mentioned, 900, despite the fact that smartphone use was discouraged, we had 902 individuals who did complete the survey using smartphones. Next slide, please. And for the output 3, we looked at the data, which was collected by the Office for National Statistics. And the survey was referred to as Labor Market Survey, or LMS. So at that time, a labor force survey started being prepared for online data collection. And the various experiments were conducted on core questions of the LFS. What is very, very important to remember here, that these LMS surveys and tests, they had mobile-first design, which means that the questionnaire was designed with a smaller screen in mind, and therefore there were no issues for larger screens. Questionnaires when they were seen on larger screens. Next slide, please. So we were able to use data from test 1 and test 2. And in test 1, analytical sample who completed questionnaires online were more than 11,000 individuals. The questionnaire was very, very short. The advanced letter was saying that it would take respondents around 10 to 15 minutes to complete. And the main questions were about demographic characteristics and also various labor market behaviors. Next slide, please. So test 2 data were built on the results from test 1, and they were testing various incentive strategies to attempt to increase uptake and to prevent attrition. So for this specific test 2, we were able to analyze the sample of nearly 18,000 individuals who completed the survey online. And these questionnaires were a little bit longer. It took 15, well, advanced letters suggested that it would take 15 to 20 minutes to complete the surveys. And the questions were asked about demographic characteristics, labor market behavior, but also about education and redundancy questions where it was appropriate. Next slide, please. Here we can see, so the devices uptake, we can see that smartphone group, which is our main interest. In test 1, around 13% completed the survey using smartphones, and in test 2, around 14.2% completed the survey using smartphones. Next slide, please. So I was conducting data quality assessment, and it was directed by the total surveyor framework. So I was able to analyze various data quality indicators, and they were used in 2 mixed mode survey contexts. So the first context was when surveys which already moved to mixed mode design, such as Understanding Society survey. So they already moved to mixed mode design by that time. However, the questionnaires were not optimized. And the second context was for the surveys which were in the process of testing for the transition to online data collection. And it was LMS surveys and tests and experiments. But we need to remember that there the questionnaires were optimized, not optimized, but they used their mobile first design. Yeah. So we used advanced statistical methods to model data quality, various data quality indicators, and different regressions techniques were used depending on the outcome variables of interest. Also, it was very important to address potential endogeneity issues, and I'll talk about this a little bit in detail a bit later. Next slide, please. So ideally, I wanted to address these data quality indicators, completion time, response style indicators, break-off rates, item non-response, differential reporting, consent to data linkage, and also responses to sensitive questions. And we were able to do it within Understanding Society questionnaires. Office for National Statistics collected very unique and interesting paradata, which allowed us to do analysis of timeouts and restarts, which wasn't available in any other service, so it was great. But within ONS data, we were able to look at completion times, break-off rates, differential reporting, but also timeouts and restarts. Next slide, please. So before I talk about the results, I'll just mention some of the definitions for some of the indicators. By break-offs, we mean partially productive interviews. So the definitions differ between the surveys. And for example, for the Understanding Society, break-offs, partially productive interviews were recorded when people passed certain section, finance section, or otherwise they were considered being unproductive. So item non-response, that was quite interesting. So we were able to analyze it only in wave 8 of Understanding Society. But what is very important to mention here is we need to remember the context of the Understanding Society. It is already wave 8 of a longitudinal study. So participants are very loyal to the study. And because of this, we observe various interesting effects. So we might not see the same if we would be analyzing cross-sectional data. So here, generally, item non-response was incredibly low. So what we did, we just looked at the item non-response across various variables and selected 6 variables with the highest item non-response and used them for the analysis. We were not able to analyze this in the context of ONS data, unfortunately. So timeouts, what are the timeouts? Timeouts are number of times the script timed out for each respondent because they left the screen idle. And something quite different, but even more useful, restarts a number of times the respondent left the screen, but then restarted, I think. Let me just, I don't see, yeah. But then, yeah, left the script and restarted. So those were the definitions. Can we please move to the next slide? Thank you. So now I would like to present the results. So first of all, for the Understanding Society. So what I was doing here, I was looking at the associations between different data quality indicators and different devices or device effects. So as I mentioned, while I was waiting for the main survey, wave 8 of Understanding Society, to become available, we did analysis of Innovation Panel, wave 9, and here I present the results for the comparisons as well. So completion times, we did find the association between devices and the completion time in the main wave of Understanding Society, and indeed, we observed that it took smartphone users longer to complete the survey than PCs. In a way, we expected this result. So we need to remember that these questionnaires were not optimized. So potentially, respondents would need to do quite a bit of scrolling up and down on the screen to see the entire screen. So this result wasn't surprising for us. However, in the Innovation Panel, wave 9, we didn't see this. We didn't see this association. Then we looked at various response style indicators. So I created various indicators, and the results were mixed, but I found association only between straight lining and devices. And we indeed found that the likelihood of straight lining was higher for smartphones and tablets in wave 8 of the Understanding Society. And the same result we found in Innovation Panel of wave 9, straight lining was higher for smartphones. In a way, again, we were expecting this result, the same like with completion time, because of course, if you think about attitudinal questions, definitely small screens wouldn't feed the entire questions and entire options. So I'm sure there was quite a bit of scrolling involved, and maybe that was the main reason why we observed higher likelihood of straight lining for smartphones. What would be really interesting to do, I know that questionnaires were now optimized in Understanding Society, is to repeat this analysis on future waves and see if these effects would be disappearing or not. Then I looked at break-off rates. What is important to mention here, in 2015, Olga Maslovskaya and Mick Cooper conducted a meta-analysis looking at break-off rates. And what they concluded, that on average, break-off rates for PCs was around 5%, and for smartphones around 13%. So what we found here We did find association between different devices and break-off rates. However, as I already mentioned, understanding society is a very specific setting, very specific survey. Respondents are very, very loyal, and we know that item non-response is low, break-off rates is also very low. We found that break-off rate, we had very small numbers of those who broke off, only 36 in the main survey and 24 in innovation panel. So it wasn't very easy to do more detailed analysis, so probably we would need to do this analysis in some other setting. However, what is important to mention here, that break-off rates were very low across all groups. And the highest was for smartphone in wave 8 of understanding society, and it was only around 1%. In innovation panel, the break-off rates were slightly higher, but again, for smartphones, that was the highest group, was only 7.2%. So, and if we look back at the meta-analysis conducted by Mick Cooper, we can conclude that we shouldn't worry about smartphones from the point of view of break-off rates in this specific survey. Then we analyzed item non-response, and we didn't find any association with different devices in understanding society wave 8, which was a great news. Then quite a lot of work was done around differential reporting. I don't know, it says that your internet connection is unstable. Is it still okay? Can you still hear me? Yeah.
I can still hear you. You did break up for a moment, but I think you're okay.
Okay, so I'm continuing.
We'll carry on. If there are more problems, we'll, as discussed, we'll just pause your video.
Okay, thank you.
We can still hear you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks. So differential reporting. So we did quite a lot of work. What we did there, we modeled survey variables. And first we controlled for the device effect with the hope that, well, if it was significant, we then controlled for various other variables which were available in the data file with the hope that the device effect would disappear. In some situations, it did disappear. In some situations, it didn't. Therefore, we obtained quite mixed results. But what we knew that because of potential endogeneity issue, this device effect might mean two things. It might mean that we indeed observe device effects, and there are differences by devices in reporting in different survey variables, or that potentially we observe this is due to selection. So we needed to do something a little bit more. So this is a very common problem in observational studies. And we know we need to do something a little bit more in order to actually decide if we indeed observe device effect or it was the effect which we observe is due to the selection problem. So there are various approaches, and different disciplines are preferring various approaches. So we first looked into instrumental variable approach, and Paul Clark from the University of Essex used it when he looked at the data quality in mixed mode survey of understanding society wave 8. We were trying to find some strong instrumental variable. However, we failed to find a strong instrumental variable. Therefore, we thought that probably this is not most suitable way for us to address indigeneity issues. So then we looked at the propensity score matching, which is really great, also great technique, which is widely used. However, the problem there that it can handle very well two groups. But in our context, we were interested in contrasting three groups: desktop and laptop, tablets, and smartphones. Of course, we could have done combining of the groups, but that wasn't the point. So we kind of thought maybe that wasn't the most suitable approach. And another limitation of this approach, that during this matching procedure, potentially a large proportion of sample might be lost due to the lack of available matches, which then would make it difficult to infer the results to the wider population of interest. Therefore, we decided we need to look for something else. So what we found that biologists, they're using something which is called negative controls approach, which we found quite interesting. What they do, they assume plausible mechanisms of associations before they start analysis. And then, for example, spurious effects or spurious treatment effects imply selection. In our case, spurious device effects would suggest omitted variable issue. So just to give an example, what we were doing, for example, we assumed before we started doing the analysis that there is no device effect on reporting gender. So we cannot find any plausible mechanism of association between gender and different devices. So we wouldn't assume that people using smartphones would report their gender differently to people who are using PCs. Therefore, if reported gender is associated with device used by respondents after controlling for other covariates, we would then conclude that we observe an omitted variable issue and can conclude that there is a selection effect and not device effect. So this is what we did for all our variables, and in the result we concluded that even in these cases where device effect was still significant, it was due to selection rather than real device effects. Then it was great that within Understanding Society Wave 8, we were able to look at consent to data linkage. There is quite a lot of discussion and it's quite important for online data collection. In Wave 8, we didn't find any association between devices and consent to data linkage. However, we found higher probability of not giving consent among smartphone users in Innovation Panel Wave 9. Also, in Understanding Society main survey Wave 8, we were able to look at sensitive questions and responses to sensitive questions, and we didn't find any association between devices and sensitive questions. Next slide, please. So now I would like to summarize our results from the ONS data or labor market survey data. So here we have two tests, test 1 and test 2, and we were able to look at 5 different data quality indicators. With completion time, we did find association between devices and completion time. However, we observed in both tests that it would take longer those who were using PCs to complete the questionnaire than those who were using tablets and smartphones. Therefore, we thought, okay, we are not worried about smartphones in this. Of course, there is a debate. Is it better to have longer time or shorter time? But the theory suggests that, and main concerns around smartphones were that people would be taking longer, and therefore that it would increase break-off rates, etc., etc. So then we also were able to look at differential reporting. We found mixed results as well as in Understanding Society, and we looked at potential endogeneity issues, and we found that all the where we did find associations between device and the reporting of specific variables, it was not due to device effect, but due to selection effects. Then we were able to look at break-off rates or partial responses, and we did find association between devices and break-off rates. And indeed, in both tests, we observed higher break-off rates for smartphones, but the rates themselves were very low. They were lower in comparison to the ones which were reported by Aigul Mavletova and Mikuba, even for the PCs. So in test 1, it was only 3.4%, and in test 2, it was only 4.2%. Then we were able to look at timeouts, given this, because we had access to this great PAR data. In the during the analysis of test 1, we did find the association between devices and timeouts, and we found that there was a higher likelihood to have timeouts for smartphones where compared to tablets. So we passed this information on to ONS to do further checks and investigations, because we thought it was quite important to figure out what was happening. When we analyzed test 2 data, we did find association. However, we saw higher likelihood for timeouts for PCs where compared to tablets, and no differences between smartphones and other devices, which was really great news for the smartphones. Then we looked at the restarts, which are even more important. We didn't find any association between devices and restarts during the test 1. And in test 2, we did find association. However, we found that there was a lower likelihood of restarts for smartphones when compared to other devices. Again, it would be interesting to find out why, but from the point of view of our analysis, we concluded that we shouldn't worry about using smartphones, that they don't produce more restarts in comparison to other devices. Next slide, please. So, the main findings from this output 2 and output 3, we could conclude that non-optimized questionnaires, such as Understanding Society, may impact on data quality through completion times, response styles, and possibly break-offs. As I mentioned, we expected to see the results for completion times and response styles. it would be very interesting to do further work on future waves and see if we observe the same results and if we could attribute it to the fact that questionnaires were not optimized. But for break-offs, we couldn't make very definite conclusions because break-off rates were very, very low, numbers were very, very low. The summary for the mobile first design of questionnaires, which was used in test 1 and test 2 of LMS survey collected by the Office for National Statistics. It may impact on data quality through break-offs and timeouts. But again, break-off rates was very, very small. It was 3.4 and 4.2%. And also timeouts we found association only in the first test. So we can conclude after, as a result of these two investigations, we can conclude we should not be concerned about respondents using smartphones for future surveys, even for longer surveys, like, for example, Understanding Society, because it takes on average about 35 to 45 minutes to complete the survey, as break-off rates is very low and data quality is not very different by devices. Next slide, please. So, of course, I already mentioned these limitations. We didn't look at cross-sectional data with non-optimized questionnaires. Results might look different. It would be quite interesting to see to what we found in Understanding Society, but it was very important to look at Understanding Society and longitudinal context. Next slide, please. So, and as I mentioned, I would like to talk a little bit about our output 4. So what we did there, we investigated non-response bias and representativeness in the first cross-national probability-based online panel, CRONOS. And as I already mentioned, it was myself, Peter Luchtig, and Gabi Durant working on this. Next slide, please. So the main motivation was, not much was known about representativeness in the first cross-national probability-based online panel, and we thought it was very important to investigate representativeness across waves and between countries in CRONOS online cross-national probability-based panel. Next slide, please. So the main research question was, how does representativeness in CRONOS online probability-based panel compare between waves and also across countries? So as I said today, because my talk is specifically on the UK, I will be talking only about Great Britain, and so we'll focus on the comparison between waves rather than I will not comment much about the differences across countries. Next slide, please. So the data, 6 waves of data were collected on the back of the European Social Survey Round 8. So the data were collected in Great Britain, Estonia, and Slovenia. So we need to remember that there are differences across these countries, for example, different internet penetration rate, different internet use, etc. Next slide, please. So methods, what we thought we would use are indicators in an innovative way to assess representativeness within this type of online panel. And our indicators that were proposed by Barry Scouten and colleagues from Statistics Netherlands in 2009. And we also look at partial R indicators which were proposed and developed by Barry Scouten and colleagues back in 2011. Next slide, please. So what is very important to mention here, so if we look only at response rates across countries at different waves, we can see that, for example, response rates in Great Britain were much lower in comparison to response rates in Estonia. However, when we conducted analysis of representativeness in Great Britain was higher in comparison to other countries, consistently across all waves. Therefore, it was very, very important to look at the representativeness in order to obtain a wider picture of data quality obtained by this first online cross-national online panel. So in specific results for the UK, we found that education contributed most to the lack of representativeness. The largest impact on non-response bias came from no education and primary education groups that were most underrepresented. And also the impact of those who were 60 to 69 across all waves, and at earlier stages 80 to 94 and later waves of 18 to 29-year-old was the largest on representativeness. And so throughout all waves, 60 to 69-year-olds were overrepresented, and at earlier stages 80 to 49 to 94 were underrepresented, and at later waves those who were 18 to 29 were underrepresented. Next slide, please. So the main limitations, I know that I didn't go into any details of our analysis. That wasn't the plan, because I wanted just to briefly introduce what we did. We know that our indicators can overestimate representativeness in specific contexts, for example, low response rate and low propensity variations. We also used coefficients of variation to make sure that we are not overestimating this representativeness. Before we started analyzing this data, we were hoping to have paradata, access to the paradata, which would allow us to do analysis by devices and to do this, to place it into the mixed device context. However, unfortunately, due to technical issues, the paradata for device used by respondents to complete survey for wave 1 and wave 2 wasn't available. So it would be really, really important to obtain this paradata for CRONOS 2, as it would be really helpful to investigate the differences by devices. Next slide, please. And just conclusions from this work. We established that it was really important to look at our indicators to have more complete picture of data quality. Also, differences in representativeness across countries are relatively small. However, response rates are different across countries. Also, differences are small across time within countries. Partial R indicators show country-specific contexts and are very helpful. They're very useful for targeting and prioritizing specific subgroups. And the results for the UK are consistent with results obtained from other social surveys in the UK, including Understanding Society. Next slide, please. So that was everything I wanted to talk about our work on the ESRC Secondary Data Analysis Initiative project. But now I wanted to say a couple of words what I'm doing now. So very recently, we secured ESRC funding for the GenPop Web 2 network. And this GenPop Web 2 network, it builds on the network which was GenPop Web, original GenPop Web network, which was funded by the ESRC through National Center for Research Methods and CRM. So the title of the project is Transitioning from Interview-Administered Surveys to Online Data Collection, Experiences, Challenges, and Opportunities. Recently, this topic became even more important as coronavirus pandemic impacts significantly on data collection organizations, and many surveys needed to move online in a very rapid manner. So the team, we're working, I'm a principal investigator on this project, and co-investigators are Lisa Calderwood from UCL, Jerry Nicholas from NatCen, and Laura Wilson from the Office for National Statistics. Next slide, please. And this network is a network of UK and non-UK based academic and non-academic partners, including government departments, survey practice organizations, and major ESRC investments to collaborate in the area of online data collection and social surveys. So of course, if you can imagine, when we were submitting the proposal, our plan of events and activities was very, very different to what actually can be done in practice, given coronavirus outbreak. So at the moment, we are finalizing how our events and activities will look like, and hopefully we'll have a very clear plan within next week or so. So more information will be available shortly through various channels. National Center for Research Methods has kindly agreed to host our website. At the moment, this website is still in progress, but we are hoping that it will become live within next week or so. So please look for information about the events. And hopefully many of you will participate in the events which we're planning to organize within next year or so. Next slide, please. And before I finish this presentation, I just wanted to make the final announcement. So myself, Bella Struminskaya from Utrecht University, and Gabi Durrant from the University of Southampton, we're guest editors for the Journal of Royal Statistical Society Series A special issue. And the title of the special issue is The Future of Online Data Collection, Social Service Challenges, Developments, and Applications. And I would like to ask you to submit your manuscripts. It would be really great to see many discussions on various issues related to online data collection. And the deadline for the submission of the manuscripts is 30th of September 2020. Thank you very much.